Um, so we'll get started. So, like, if you want to speak up, I'm not going to see people like raising their hand or whatever. Just chime in. Just unmute the mic and chime in. And I'll just be talking. Otherwise, mostly today, what we're going to do is just go through the syllabus, and that's pretty much it. It's sort of a telegraphing the past, what's to come for this semester. Um, and whatever, I'm in my kitchen and you'll be wherever you are. I'll post all of these lectures on Canvas after they're done. I mean, just give me like, I have another class right after this one, so it might be later in the day when I get to it. But everything we do here, the videos and the audio, whatever this file, I'll post on Canvas. If the attendance gets down to like 6, because people can watch it later, I'm not going to post those. We'll come up with a threshold. Uh, Pacific is encouraging people to have an attendance policy, and attendance policies strike me as sort of a hassle for both you and me, where we have to document attendance and give points for it. I know people have competing priorities, and to not have to negotiate with every competition in the to-do list. So as long as enough people are still coming to the lectures, um, I'll just keep posting them on Canvas as soon as they're done. I don't actually do anything fancy with Canvas. It's just like a Dropbox. I just post announcements and files there. Um, so again, the roster, that's, everyone can see the slide. Like, just interrupt me if you can't see what's on my screen. If I'm referencing the slides and there's nothing on your screen, let me know. But for the roster, I mean, there's that little kid on there who's vomiting. If you're that guy, well, you can sleep in, right? If you're really hungover or whatever, you can sleep in. But I just, as long as there are enough people still coming to the lecture, and the best time to ask questions is during lecture, or during office hours. I posted that link on Canvas. Also, the contact information, just Nathaniel Holmgren is, I don't know if he's here today, but he'll be here on some of the days, not all. He has an enormous publication record already. He took this class a couple of years ago, did really well in it, and so I sort of retained him in my inner circle to work with as a
That's what I
research
needed
collaborator.
today.
Pardon? Uh, so um, anyway, so Nathaniel Holmgren is going to be helping out with this class. Sometimes he'll chime in on these lectures. All the labs, there's 4 labs that go through him. Anyway, the contact info is there. The office hours are listed there. I'm not going to be in my office. I will very seldom be in my office, but that phone number that's listed that's my office number. If you call and leave a message, it just like emails it to me immediately, and I'll see it. If you leave a message at that phone number, I'll get it in like 2 minutes. And then just be aware of the contact information. It's a cjensen1 at pacific.edu. Every semester, a bunch of people write cjensen at pacific.edu, and become more and more frustrated with my lack of response because I don't get those ones. So just make sure you write the correct email address. This is all in the syllabus, all the course contents. We're not going to go through everything. We'll go through a few parts of it. The purpose of the course. We'll go through some of the history, because not just to bore you, but the history gives us information about what to expect in the future. We can see things like COVID, right? With coronavirus, we see histories of whether it's Spanish flu, it is SARS, it is the plague, it is cholera. You go through these historical pandemics and you can see the arcs of where they go. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how these mathematical models came to be. Because if we're going to move forward, right now what we're doing will be historical in 20 years, and half of it will be silly. Some of our research methods will be a little bit outdated, and so history just keeps accumulating. And to understand the sort of follies and foibles of our ancestors gives us a lot of information about the trajectory of where we're going. So we'll start with the history, and then we'll get into a bunch of the math. You don't have to do any math with a calculator or a pencil or whatever. It's all SPSS. SPSS is free for you. It's like $1,000 program, but through Pacific you can get it for free. And I assume everyone has a computer, being as you're all here. And as long as that computer has internet and you can get in touch with the IT people, the help desk, those people, they can install remotely, they can install SPSS. And then that's what we'll use to go through all of the research uh, models that, ANOVAs and regressions, stuff like that. These locations aren't really open at the moment. The library, all of the library services are available. They're just not available in the flesh, right? You can't just tread on in there and ask people in person, but the library staff are working from their kitchens, and you can ask them whatever questions. You have main gym. Normally we have SPSS access. Your house, there's probably going to be where almost everything is done, is just from your house. The labs, again, there's 4 of them. You'll work with Nathaniel for them. I do a lot of international public health work going through UBOS, it's Uganda Bureau of Statistics, so sort of Eastern Equatorial Africa. I've taken students there a few times, and we work with the Bureau of Statistics. It's like in the US, right, we have the Census Bureau, which is like a bunch of high school graduates collecting data and doing a poor job. At the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, it's actually real. Everyone has at least a master's degree in statistics who runs that, even the people who go door to door collecting statistics. So the data are much better than the US Census Bureau, which is sort of like 4th world status right now for the US statistics, where the kind of literal 3rd world is beating us in matters of stats by a lot. And then St. Vincent, this is a hospital system I work with. The hub is in Indiana, where I do most of my collaboration, but medical. So this is clinical epidemiology. If you're interested in pursuing medicine, research really is the biggest component of your graduate application. GPA is very important, and you have to, if you want to get into PT, OT, PA, something like that, aim for at least a 3.5. If you got at least a 3.2, you're competitive. Under 3, it's going to be really, really hard. That said, if you have a couple of publications, that's the equivalent of 0.2, 0.3 on your GPA. So we have people who've graduated this program and gone into, we have someone right now who's in UC Davis's MD program, doing all online classes, but her GPA was okay, but I published twice with her before she applied. And so she had one of the lowest incoming GPAs, but she was a published author. And so she outcompeted her peers. That way we see the same thing in PT. So if you have like a 2.9 to 3.1 GPA and you want to go into physical therapy, you better have some publications to outcompete your peers. Either public health, that's what the UBOS thing is, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, or St. Vincent. I also work with a couple of the local hospitals, but those databases aren't as big. St. Vincent is a level 1 trauma center. It's like a giant national hospital that I work with. You don't need the book. It's helpful. It's a good book. I was one of there's 20 authors or 25 authors or something. Larry Armstrong and William Kramer. They were both my professors when I was doing my PhD. They're the primary editors of the book. And so ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, that's usually what we publish through. They have 3 or 4 journals. Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise is their big one. But so this is ACSM's official book. They've been around since 1954. It's the biggest organization in health and exercise science, exercise physiology, kinesiology, experimental bio, something. All of these fields fall under that same umbrella, which is sort of governed by ACSM. And so this is the book. One of the chapters I was a co-author on. And so I'm not encouraging you to read my chapter because I wrote it. I wrote what I thought was important to teach in a class. And so that's why that chapter has a slightly larger presence than some of the other chapters. This book is also really good, but it's a little bit less necessary. It's more epidemiology proper. And we'll talk about some of this stuff, transmission vectors, things like that. Um, there are 2 editions. This is the 2nd edition. The first, and there's like 10 chapters in the second, or no, that was the 1st edition. There's 10 chapters in the 1st edition, 12 in the 2nd. And so you can see the difference between these chapters. It's all the same stuff. They just added a couple of chapters and changed the cover art. I mean, that's pretty much all that changed. Is like there's like a Portland, Oregon sort of hipster on the cover of this one versus the previous one has like cigarettes and mosquitoes. But the chapters are pretty much the same. It's all the same content. And the first one is going to be way cheaper. The second one just has a couple of different chapters in it. Useful if you can get it really cheap. If you can get the thing for like $10, pick it up. If it's expensive, I don't know, it's fine. You know, find some PDF online or something like that. So Canvas and Zoom, you all know how to use Zoom. You're all here. Canvas is, you must know how to use that too, because that's where I posted this information. And so just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, everyone so far has done everything right. That's the, the link to Canvas. And I don't do anything sophisticated. I don't do anything advanced or interesting in Canvas. It's just a file bank where I'm going to post announcements. I'm going to post, the actual lectures themselves, these recordings, the labs will be posted there. So it's just a file bank. There's nothing interactive there. This is a little bit different from how the syllabus is laid out, a tiny bit in terms of the tests, quizzes, and assignments. The representation here in this lecture, it's barely different from how it's laid out in the syllabus. But there's 3 exams that are worth 100 points each. And then there's a final exam that's worth like 30 points, and you guys write it. Everyone in the class, you're the ones who write all those questions. There seems to be a math error on the screen that I have to figure out which one of those numbers is right. Cumulative final exam, 30 points, 20 points, I have whatever, that's probably 20. But the poster is going to be 100 points, and you'll present it at the very end digitally here, right? You'll present your research in groups, pair up, get into triplets, something like that. If you have friends in class, you want to team up with your friends. Unless your friends are known slackers, then you can avoid those friends. But you'll want to team up with people in the class. Whoever has the highest GPA, call dibs first. But so there's 3 exams that are worth 100 points each. I still haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do those yet. It'll probably be on Canvas, one of those timed ones, but I'll give people an enormous amount of time, double time to do it or something like that. It's going to be weird. It's going to be a weird semester, but 4 labs, you do those with Nathaniel Holmgren. He'll oversee that. The CD certification, I'll talk more about that soon. IRB forms, we'll talk more about that soon. That's just preliminary stuff, sort of prereqs to be able to do research. It's all free. Everything there is free. And then the take-home test at some point during the semester with a little bit of extra credit in it. This is the breakdown. It's out of 500 points, and I don't like curve up or down or anything. There's rounding along the way for the tests. There's a little extra credit on the tests and extra credit along the way. But the actual grades, whether it's an A-, a B+, a B, a B-, all those divisions are firm. But the grading will be relatively friendly along the way. It's just when I get to the very end, I don't, it's just whatever you got is what you get. Oh, I don't feel like talking about any of these. Pages 5 through 8 in the syllabus has all of this stuff. And the first person to email me the reason why there's a dog on this slide gets 0.35 extra credit points. The first email I receive that has the explanation of why there's a sad puppy on this slide. Course objectives. If this is just, we're going to go through a lot of statistics. If you've taken stats before, it's going to be a lot easier. You'll have an introduction to a lot of these things, the t-tests and chi-squared, and obviously the basics of mean, median, mode, stuff like that. We'll get into things like linear regression, logistic regression, Poisson or negative binomial regression, and the difference between that one and logistic regression. They're very similar, and linear regression. They're a little closer to linear. But all of these regressions are a little bit, they seem to overlap in spirit, but in the letter of that law, there are specific differences for which regression model you use. I'll teach you how to use all of them, and sort of making sense of the world around you. These 10 things, this is what we'll go through. Central tendency, that's just mean median mode. I think everyone probably knows that now, but this never, when I was doing my PhD, I had an undergrad and a master's in health and exercise science. And I go into my PhD, and I loved it when professors would hit the basics before going into, I did exercise biochemistry in my PhD, and the basics were nice, because it sets your footing, right? You just get a little bit of traction, and then you go sprinting into the new territory. And so I teach similarly, where I'm not going to leave behind the fundamentals, some of the basic stuff where people have known it since the 5th grade. Fine. Yeah, you've known it since the 5th grade. That's wonderful. Let's set our footing, and then we'll start our gait, right? We'll start trotting forward with better traction if we can set our footing. And so we start pretty easy. Mean median mode, bivariate correlations. That's just our two variables related. Bi variable, two variables, are they related? Chi-squared, t-test, stuff like that. And then we get into the logistic, linear, and negative binomial regressions, and the ANOVA. It's a little bit more complicated, but by the time we get there, it's not bad. And Nathaniel's really good at these things too, because I'm more removed from my foundation. Anybody who's been teaching for a few years, for up until a long time. If you've been teaching for a long time, you're farther and farther removed year by year from learning the fundamentals, from the foundation. And so sometimes I forget what foundational, like everybody knows when Halloween is. If you're older than 6, if you're older than like 4, you know when Halloween is. Like day-night cycles, like just being alive, there's a lot of things and if you've been in a field for a while, whether it's physiology or epidemiology or athletic training or physical therapy or medicine, whatever the field you've been in for a while, you start to distance yourself from the fundamentals, from the foundation that you established 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and then you sort of forget that that's part of it, and you assume everybody knows that. And so the equivalent of saying, oh, the assignment is due the day after Halloween, when nobody knows when Halloween is, and so I try to be cautious about establishing that foundation. Just because I'm pretty far removed from the foundation, I don't want to neglect it. And so if the foundation is just insultingly basic, just stick with it. Like it's fine. You can tune out and alt tab over to like Amazon or something and shop for a little while. But it's helpful to keep that foundation involved the whole time. This is all in the syllabus, the course content. Today is just a bunch of kind of here's what's to come. We'll start getting into the history on Wednesday. The fundamentals of study design, that's a lot of historical stuff and sort of vernacular nomenclature, right? The statistician's parlance, the type of language you use. So the difference between a case study, a case report, a case series, and what correlational and cross-sectional studies are. Some of these, as you get into any field, the parlance, right? The type of language changes. There's specific phrases, specific kind of nouns and verbs that relate to that field. And so, I don't remember when I was in Oregon or something, and I saw this sign that said AC fixing. And my thought was acromioclavicular fixing, like you have some sort of like shoulder issue. And then it took me a minute, and it wasn't even air conditioning, it was something else. Air conditioning was my second thought, and so, but that language, that the parlance or nomenclature that is involved in every field of study, becoming familiar with it, incorporating it into your own vocabulary is necessary. And so we do that very early on. So we start doing that in lecture 3. Lecture 4, how to come up with theories on things, sort of how to think about phenomena. And I would ask, but everyone would have to like unmute and it's a hassle. But most people, I'm just going to assume when I'm in class, I can just ask questions and people talk and the hands go up and gestures happen. And right now I can see like 4 people on the side of my screen. And so I can't really get a lot of visual cues from you, but most people want to go into some sort of healthcare practitioner. Whether physical therapy is a huge one, but it's not the only one, right? I mean, there's physician assistance programs and occupational therapy, and there's sort of a higher tier of personal training, and there's exercise physiologists who work with a lot of oxygen exchange, and I mean they have those positions at Google. You can be the exercise physiologist for Google or Apple or something. And so but there's practitioner jobs all over the world, all over California, all over the US, all over the world, and figuring out how research improves delivery of healthcare, that bench to bedside part. And that's where it sort of gets into the chapter that I did in the book, where why does research matter? Why is it relevant? How is knowing any of this stuff going to help you be a better physical therapist? How will it help you be a better occupational therapist, or write exercise prescriptions for people? And it's probably the most important thing there is, but it bypasses people because there's math involved and nobody likes math. And then we get into some of the more contemporary lectures 6, 7, and 8, sort of plowing through history. What was statistical understanding like in the 19th century, right? So in the 1800s, what was that like? What was it like in the 20th century? And getting into the 21st century, where are we moving? It's a bunch of big data, and we'll get there, but sort of the future applications of all of this stuff. And that sort of ends the first block as we review, and it's nomenclature and history. And then we have our first exam, September 21. I hope people are around for that day. And get into the next block. And for every single lecture, I'll begin with what's to come before the exam. Not, block 2, block 3, block 4, but for block 1, I'll begin with that same little schedule, this little schedule of, these classes are to come, but the last slide will be this one. So that everyone knows when the exam is coming. There's no surprise. You don't have to dig up the syllabus. You can just, at the beginning of every lecture, I'll spend 20 seconds being like, remember the exam is on September 21st or whatever. And we get into a little bit more on, in the second block, we start to get into a little more actual statistics here, writing a background, asking research questions, but a p-value, everyone gets this wrong. I mean, there are articles that have been published about college classes, statistics classes, teaching this incorrectly, and how this is sort of ruining people's understanding of probability. And so we're going to spend a lot of time on the p-value. There's 3 lectures dedicated just to the p-value. Most research methods classes I have seen the material in got it wrong of what the actual p-value means, what its history is, what its applications are, and what its meaning is, and what we should do with it in the future. There's just too many errors. And so we're going to spend 3 lectures on that because it's important. And then we're going to get into the actual labs and the statistical models. And so a bunch of regressions are going to get introduced here, more on regressions. And then throughout the syllabus, the due dates are there. So research topic is due on Wednesday, October 14th. So you know when things are to come. There's, again, no surprises. I'm sure throughout this semester, the road will be bumpy because it's all digital, and I much prefer being in the same room and being able to have conversations that aren't weird. This is weird. I'm not getting engagement. It's hard to understand if I need to go slower or faster, or because I can usually look at people's faces, and there's like, as soon as people, um, I often, well, I probably am not going to go on any tangents this semester, because I use these tangents when I see people's eyes just start to, when you're falling asleep and you don't want to, and your eyes just get dead, like you're like dead from your eyes, and you're half asleep. I did that when I was in my undergrad once. I dropped my book, and it was just so, I was sitting in an economics class, and I had my book open, and I was trying to shield my eyes, and the book fell, and I was in the front row. But there's this expression I'll see, especially when I'm talking about math or even the history stuff. This is, epidemiology is not immune to exhaustion in students, and I'm aware of that, right? I teach physiology too, and physiology is so easy to reel people in, right? To set a hook and reel people in on physiology, because I can just say, your body's doing this right now. And, or do you want to be run faster? All right, this is what track coaches tell you, and it's hilarious. It's so ridiculously wrong. Let me tell you the truth, and you will be the fastest person on your track team. Or you want to jump high, like, oh, I want to dunk, or you want, it's something in the weight room, or you want to lose weight. Summer's here forever in California, so you want to lean up, or whatever. I can tell you the physiology, and you can use that, and you can start doing it today, and it's your body that's doing it. Physiology is so easy to set a hook, to be sort of interesting-ish. Math, right, and sort of historical research, these aren't things that people are naturally drawn to. I mean, just go to like a fourth grade class, and I can do nothing but sympathize with the math teacher who's forcibly trying to to have mandate learning, to force learning in kids who really don't want to do it. And these like fourth graders who they want nothing else but they're actively trying to purge that information from their head because of the pain of storage. And so epidemiology, it has its interesting points, but it's one of the most useful classes that you'll take. And I know it's not the most interesting. For 70% of it is not particularly interesting, but man, it's useful. Everyone who capitalizes on what we learn and goes and publishes, they have the easiest acceptance into graduate programs. They get into the job market at a higher level. I mean, publication is the currency of graduate work. In the undergrad, it's more about, liberal arts, did you get your language? Did you get your, music history? Did you get your English? Did you get your religion and your diversity and your, well, all of these different domains? Then, we touched on a field of study. When you get into grad school, all they care about is publications. Now, clinical, they care about publications less, which is to say an enormous amount. If you go into a PhD, master's PhD, all anyone cares about is publications. You can have a 2.8 GPA and get into Harvard if you have publications. And so that's what I'm teaching you here is publication. Our department, Health and Exercise Science, in any given year outpublishes the rest of University of the Pacific combined. Every other, include the dental school, include everything. Pharmacy and PT and the dental school and biology and chemistry and include everybody. And University of the Pacific minus our department, that's a close competition. And so, and it's mostly students as first authors. I haven't published a first author thing in years. I've done like 80 first author as student projects in the last few years, but I'm not interested in publishing in my name anymore. Now I'm a co-author on your work, but only if we can get through this class and you figure out the utility of it, and you can incorporate stats and you begin to understand that. That's what Nathaniel Holmgren did, who's our GA, which is why I retained him so hard for this class. Is I'm the graduate director, so I have sort of ultimate say in what happens to our graduate students and where they get assigned. And so I exercise that power, sort of my executive power, to retain Nathaniel for this class, because he is so good at the research methods piece, and he's one of the top professors in the school. He's a first-year master's student, but his research profile ranks him in the top, top 50 professors of all time at Pacific. All time. And so you can do that too, is what I'm saying. All right, whatever, labs happen. Let's keep moving. Exam 2 is on National Reptile Awareness Day, so October 21st. and there's going to be a lot of stats on that. I haven't figured out exactly how that's going to happen. Nathaniel and I had some discussions, but we'll figure it out. And then getting into block 3, it's just, the executive summary, getting into completing projects a little bit more. CD certification, this is something everyone has to do. It's free. If you're a student, if you're not a student, it has a fee, but you log in through your student account and you can be a CITI certification for free. But we'll talk more about actual epidemiology and the institutional review boards, collecting data, and all that stuff. And then we get into block 4. This is where blocks 3 and 4 appear to be different in the syllabus, because I just labeled block 3 different from block 4. I labeled them differently. Where block 3 ends with lecture 30. Block 4 is after epidemiology. So epidemiology, we're going to talk about that soon, but it's sort of observational, right? You don't interact, you don't intervene, you take data that exists. You take information that's already out there and you start crunching those numbers to make sense of the world. The world is numbers. Even if you quantify, political parties as 0, 1, 2, 3, and men are 0 and women are 1, and you start quantifying all of these values, and you can start to make predictions about how men in specific age brackets are going to vote in this coming election, and you can start to make sense of the world. All you have to do is convert it to numbers, and you can do this prediction modeling. But then after that, when you collect active data, that's what block 4 is. It's active collection of data and analysis of variance, or ANOVA. That's what we'll get into there. Ronald Fisher, this guy, probably one of history's biggest assholes. We'll talk about his personality a little bit too. He had to have like 50 kids because he didn't think the rest of the world was smart enough. He was kind of right. That guy was brilliant. He in his head, this is jazz age. This is like Great Gatsby is coming out. And he's inventing, so it's not like computers, and he's just inventing modern statistics in his head. So if you ask people like, who's the best mathematician ever? Everyone says like Einstein. I don't know. Yeah, Ronald Fisher. That guy's a candidate, but most people don't know who he is because he's not as famous as Einstein, but he just invented modern statistics in his head. And so we'll do some kind of what happens after epidemiology, Thanksgiving break, and then like nothing happens after Thanksgiving break. I don't know why we just don't end there, because we get back. And we'll talk a little bit after Thanksgiving break. I expect the attendance to fall precipitously after Thanksgiving break, that people, I don't know, maybe you're already all home, so Thanksgiving is just an extension of now. It's just going to smell like turkey in the house. That's the only difference. But so the poster presentation day, this used to cost money. It doesn't anymore, because it used to be it's like $10 or $15 to print a poster, and you get 2 or 3 people together, so it's a few dollars a head. But we'll just present online. You'll just do essentially what I'm doing for 5 minutes in your groups, and it might go on a few extra minutes for that class. But the final exam, it's on the last day. Terrible time to have it. But it's man, if you don't get 100% on the final exam, you've done something wrong, because the students write every question. I just and you take it in pairs, you take it in teams or pairs, whatever your poster group is, your research group, those are the teams you take the final exam in. I just try to make it as fun as possible, as have as much fun during it as possible. We'll come up with a way to have a good time. Usually what I would do during the final, for anyone who's had me before, we have these like feasts, right? We have these, I'll bring some food. People sign up to bring whatever food, and there's just, everyone is nauseated by the time the final is over. Can't very well do that here, but we'll figure out a way to make the final not too painful. I put the finals week in here, the actual schedule for all your classes, just whatever, for the sake of it. And these are all the dates, last day to add and drop classes, whatever, when spring classes become available, just so you're aware of a place you can easily find that stuff. The readings that are helpful. Remember, no reading is necessary. It's just helpful. The readings are of value, but they're not critical. again, more block 2, the readings, block 3, the readings, block 4, the readings. They just get lighter and lighter. Often when somebody first starts something, whatever it is, you embark on some journey, your pace is very fast. You're running along, and then you just get tired as you go. You lose interest as you go. And so I very deliberately set up the readings to be, block 1. If you're like, fresh out of the gates, full speed, you feel like reading, okay, there's the list, have at it. And then as we fatigue, fatigue sets in throughout the semester. Sometimes it sets in throughout, the first week, but throughout the semester, we sort of slow down. And so I did the same thing with the readings. All of our due dates, that's what this slide is. So if you want to just keep this handy somewhere, so you know when the exams are, when the due dates are, these are the days in which grades are somehow impacted, whether there's something due or there's an exam in class. From the first exam to the final, everything is there. I don't feel like talking about these things, but they're all in the syllabus. There's a page, the final 2 pages in the syllabus is sort of COVID specific, where there's all these links. Like, I don't know the student experience. I was a student at Pacific once. I did my master's here, but it was like 15 years ago, and things have changed, right? The DeRosa Center was built the year I left, like I think the year after I left, or 2 years later or something. And so campus has changed remarkably since I was here. And I don't know what the student experience is like, really, other than what you all tell me. But there's a lot of information that's probably helpful, because this semester is going to be profoundly different from previous semesters. And everything is online, and so where do you access things? I wanted a list of all of the links and the useful information that might come in handy, right down to like student jobs. Where do you find a handshake now as opposed to whatever it was before? And so where you can find jobs, where you can find sources of, whatever resource or sources of entertainment is all in that last one. Notes, I don't know, you can just re-listen to these lectures over and over, but something I usually talk about is taking notes by hand works better than typing, because you can't write fast. Like, if you okay, so I doubt anybody is into like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, sort of like fantasy literature, but the best book's way better than all of those ones. Those are all sort of children compared to Name of the Wind, if anyone has read that one. But there's this character named Chronicler in it, and that guy can write at the pace of speech, and it explains how. It's interesting because it's impossible, right? It's impossible to write at the pace of, so just try to take a pencil and start writing at the pace that I'm talking. Like you'll be 4 words in and you won't know what the 5th word was, because I'm in the next paragraph already. And so when you take notes by hand, you have to summarize, and you have to sort of put it in your own words and your own images, and in doing that, there's this great effort your brain undertakes to create the information in a memorable way, some way that you can recall. And that process the brain goes through is the same process as memorizing. And so you can memorize things very effectively if you take notes by hand. It's not as effective if you type, because you can type faster. And it's fine, however you want to do it, right? However you want to learn information. I still don't know what the tests are going to look like. So we're going through the semester together, trying to figure everything out. The only thing that I'll actually teach for this content that's not syllabus for this lecture is, it's nice to question the information that you're given. That's really what this class is about. You're presented information. Where did that information come from? How valid is it? If I say something, don't just accept it because I'm the professor, right? Question. Don't be like obnoxious where every other sentence I say, go, whoa, 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 what's your source? Because then we'll never get through a lecture. But I try to keep sources, at least in physiology. People don't understand. They're like, this is boring. The slides are cluttered with citations. Like, yeah, because I want people to know that this information is actually in the medical literature or in PT literature or whatever. It comes from peer-reviewed journals, and I'm not just whimsically making shit up, right? So that but to be critical, right? To be sort of doubtful of any information that is provided. Skepticism is probably the best mental resource you have. Don't just accept things because they're said, because they're posted, or even because they're published. We'll talk about that later. But so this is my concluding uh, explanation of sometimes what people say is not the truth. Like, who's heard for the acronym and every harsh curse word is sort of monosyllabic in nature. They're all like with these one syllable terse harshness of these curse words. But like, for unlawful carnal knowledge. I mean, I've heard that like 1,000 times of what that acronym is. And like, that's not that, no, that's not even close. Like, you can go back through the Germanic history of language and find the root words. None of them are an acronym, right? But people just say stuff because like, I don't know, it's interesting or whatever. And so I heard somebody say, SHIT, SHIT, is an acronym for store high in transit. And there's this whole believable story that goes along with it about how, if you have if you're shipping, like, they use horse manure and whatever, for a fertilizer, and sometimes you walk around campus at Pacific and it just smells like baby poop. I mean, it just reeks out there, and it's probably some fertilizer or one of those weird trees we have. But the fertilizer, maybe people are shipping manure, and manure is giving off methane, and methane is flammable, and so it would smell horrible, and it would be dangerous to have this flammable gas down with storage in the cargo hold of the boat. And so store high in transit, SHIT, is stamped on the boxes of manure. And so shit, what is in these boxes? Shit. It's a good story, but it's just not even close to true. There's no part of that story that's true. But if we're going to talk about root words, the root word for science is the same root word, and this part is actually true. It's the same root word as shit. Shit and science come from the exact same root word, and so the history, as we trace languages back, you get to Proto-Indo-European. We're pretty old here, but sky, that SKHEI, it's sky. That was to separate or divide. And so you wake up in the morning and you're one creature. Your colon is full, and that's a part of you. You step on the scale, it measures how much bulk you have, right? If you do a hydrostatic tank, how much you displace in the water, all of that bulk, that fecal bulk, is a part of you. And then you take your dump and you separate yourself from your feces, right? And so that's what sky meant. It's this, you're literally separating yourself, dividing yourself from the contents of your colon. And eventually we start to move forward, and skira, which is to know, this is separating yourself. You can distinguish things. You can tell them apart. You can tell the feces from the butthole, right? You can tell these things apart at this point. And so to know comes from the same word as separate, which was used as taking a dump, is shitting, was to separate. And so sky becomes skira. Scientia, that's science, right? Science, scientia, is comes from the exact same sky, comes from the same root word as shit. So shit itself, you can just, like, it's the same, like a schism, schism, a divide. You can trace these root words back Proto-Germanic. English is a Germanic language, but you can trace these things back and get to the root words. But yeah, shit is not store high in transit. You can follow this word back, but if you follow the word science back, you actually do get to shit at some point. So that's everything for today. The only stuff you really have to take with you, I don't know, maybe I'll have a question somewhere about the root word of science, but that would be the only content question. The rest of it is knowing how to navigate this semester. and what the due dates look like, lecture format, where we're headed, what the resources are, stuff like that. I have no idea. We aren't like over, right? I assume we're under in time. Will you guys unmute yourselves and then chime in if you have am I shouting into this thing? Is it just like peer? Okay.
You're good.
Okay, so this volume is that you can just adjust your computer volume if I'm like causing deafness, or leave your volume up and file a lawsuit. But let me know if my pacing. Let me know if you have questions about the content. Like where are we? What do you have?
Oh, I got nothing at the moment.
All right. And is it safe to interpret the silence of everybody else as a similar position? That there's no, lingering questions. Questions coming up. Oh, somewhere there's a. I don't know how to get to the.
Speak for everybody. No.
Yeah, where's the chat room? Um. Oh, okay. So, uh, Lee, did you eventually get in? I'm guessing.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, a little while ago.
Oh, okay.
It took me like over a half hour to get that login info and everything set up.
Okay, but
I've never had to log into Zoom before.
yeah, I don't know if we're at 43. I'm guessing that's everybody, everybody-ish. And so it seems like okay, see, another no questions. So we'll start getting into content, and I'll keep this little chat box open throughout the lectures. And if anybody has questions, you can just unmute and speak up, and I might finish my thoughts, my train of thought, and then if I have like 3 more seconds in my sentence, I might wrap up my sentence and then engage with whatever question you have, and we can move forward with it. And sometimes questions can steer the direction of our lectures too. Because usually if one person has a question, there's very few isolationists in terms of inquisitiveness. If one person has a question, usually a bunch of people have the same question. So you can either type them or unmute and speak up, and I'll try to be aware of sometimes I just start going fast. And you can always re-listen to the lectures, but I don't know. That's all I have for today. So I posted the office hour information in the exact same post as the regular Zoom information, and so I'll be on office hours today if anyone wants to show up. But for today, this is my farewell. So go enjoy the rest of your smoky COVID Monday, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.